Hello everyone. Now we are going to study about our new chapter, which is chapter number 4, and its name is experimental research, and it is from our subject research methods in education, and our course code is 8604. You can download this whole book from Alama Open University, so you can understand my lectures. So let's begin this chapter. First of all, objectives. By the time you have completed this unit, you are expected to be able to, number one, distinguish experimental research from non-experimental type research studies. Number two, state the conditions under which experimental studies can purpose in the area of educational planning and management. Number three, distinguish various types of designs of experimental researches. Number four, discuss the advantages and limitations of the experimental design described in the unit. Number five, recognize that the increased control of extensious variable require a comparable increase in complexity of design. Number six, compare the internal and external validity of an experiment and state the extent to which the result of an experiment can be generalized. Number seven, read technical reports of experimental research studies with increased understanding and analyze the results of two research experiments. So let's begin with introduction, students. In this unit, an effort has been made to introduce the concept of experimental research in the field of educational planning and management. The meaning and definition of an experiment has been first been discussed, and various experimental design has been presented so that the education management may be able design various experiments in the area of this in his interest. The concept of control and experiment groups and dependent and independent variables have also been discussed in this unit. So basically, what is an experiment? An experiment is a scientific device for obtaining an answer to the question. If that is done under carefully controlled condition, what will happen? An experiment is a situation in which the relationship between the cause and effect is determined. Next is law of single variable. The earlier assumption of experimental variables based upon a law of the single variable. The law in this simplest form has been stated in the preceding. The law provide the basis of experimental in earlier said Boy's law and Charles' law are the examples to understand the concept of experimental. Boy's law stated when the temperature Q is consist, the volume of an ideal gas is inversely proportional to the pressure exerted upon the gas. In other words, when the pressure is increased, volume decrease. Vi divided by V2 is equal to P2 divided by P1, where V is the volume and P is the pressure. According to the Charles law, the volume of the ideal gas is proportional to the temperature. When the temperature increase, volume increase. Symbolically, Vi divided by V2 is equal to T1 divided by T2, where V is the volume and T is the temperature. Secondly, we are now studying about major components of an experiment. In a simplest conventional experiment refer to a usefully made in an experimental group and a control group. The experimental group is exposed to influence the factors under consideration, and control group is not exposed to observe as they're made in the determination when the different appears or when changes or modification occur in the experimental groups as contracted with the control group, whereas the other groups which was made to sit on the same traditional furniture will be named as control group. So now we study about variables. The dictionary meaning of the word variable is the characteristics which able to assume different numerical values. In research terminology, variable are the condition or the characteristics that an experimental multiplication, control, or observation. The researcher study the effect of the use of audio visual aid and academic achievement manipulates and control the use of the auto versus aid and observation and academic achievement of students. In the context of Boyle's law, the volume of a gas and the pressure will be of the two variables, whereas the case of the Charles law, the volume and the temperature were the two variables. Then in this we have A, independent variables, and B, the dependent variable, and C, the interventing variable, and number D is extinguished variable. So then next we are going to study about techniques of controlling extraneous variable. Although the extraneous variable cannot be completely controlled by experiments, but there are certain measures and techniques which can be used to minimize the effect of the extinguished variables. Some of these techniques are discussed below. Number 1 is A, removing the variable. Number 2 is randomization. Number 3 is matching cases. Number 4 is balancing cases. Number 5 is analysis of variables of covariance. Students, now we're going to study about experimental validity. In most of the experimental researchers carried out in laboratory, a number of extinguished variables tend to confound the result in such a way that it is difficult to evaluate their influence on the result. Research and accept as truth, the experiment must have an internal and external validity. So first we are going to study about internal validity. Internal validity is the basic minimum limit necessary to make a result of the experimental interpretation. Internal validity questions where the experimenter treated readily makes a difference in the dependent variable. According to the best experiment has been internal variable to be extended to the factors that has been manipulated. Independent variable actually has a genuine effect on the observed consequences. Dependent variable in the experimental setting. Students, now we're going to study about external variable. The value of an experimental variable lies in the ability to provide a basis of generalization from the sample to the total population. The conclusion of the research study that present spaced drill improved spelling more quickly among 10 students of class 4 in where the very little practical value unless the result enable and generalize or primary school children. So in order to the maximum experimental validation, some efforts are made in improving the experimental design, which is really, if ever, perfect. According to Valian version, both of the internal and external validation are important, and through experimental design we attempt to embrace adequate validity, since enhancing one type of the validity may be tend to jeopardize the other. We often attempt to secure an adequate compromises. The compromises is essential that of attaining sufficient control to make the result interpretable while maintaining enough realism so that the result will generalize adequate to the intended situation. Students, now we're going to understand about experimental design. An experimental design is the blueprint of the procedures that enables the researcher to test hypotheses by reaching valid conclusions about the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. Selecting of the practical design that is based upon the purpose of the experiment, the type of the variables to be manipulated, and the condition of the limited effects under which the condition is designed is to be employed in an interpretation data relationship, where T is treatment, O is observation, E is experimental group, C is control group, and R is randomly selected. First we are going to, students, study about pre-experimental design. Design number 1, the simplest design, one short case study. Number 2 is about the true experimental design, in which the design is clear and improvement over was a strong, and the true experimental design may be possible of the influence of the effect of testing and the interaction with the experimental variables. And number 3 is quasi experimental design. The experimental design provide control of when and to whom the measurement is applied. Out of the number of quasi experiment design, only few of brief designs, where it is Q1 and Q2 is given. So at the end we can say about these design as this will be enabled to experimental to apply statistical techniques to determine what is the effect of the teaching method on the achievement. Number 2, what is the effect of the sex on the achievement, and this is keep. So thank you. But in conclusion, I just want to tell you, you have had a good study about the designing of an experiment in the area of educational planning and management, and I am sure that the study of this unit will be help you a lot in writing research thesis if you plan to conduct an experiment. So thank you, students, for watching this experimental research topic. Hope I meet you in next unit.